Alright, let's review Disgaea 6, created by Nippon Ichi Software in 2021. I will be reviewing the Nintendo Switch port. Disgaea was one of my childhood favorite series, and I've played and completed 7 Disgaea games. For those unfamiliar with Disgaea, it is a parody strategic RPG where tropes are exaggerated for comedic purposes. Contrary to RPGs where you play as a hero, the Disgaea characters are demons who are full of evil mischief. In this game, you play as Zed, who is a zombie setting out to defeat the God of Destruction. The God of Destruction is the strongest overlord in history and lays waste to every netherworld it traverses. Zed was once weak, but he has a special ability to reincarnate a bit stronger every time he is killed, similar to Goku in Dragon Ball Z. He has already died 10,000 times, but throughout the game, he meets new characters that teach him about a new type of power, which is the power of friendship. Disgaea 6 starts off with an exceptional plot that is straightforward with highly stereotyped characters in a comedic way. The dialogue and pacing are excellent. I found myself looking forward to each new story element. Each chapter is dedicated to either introducing or developing a character, and each character's plight also relates to Zed in a new way that helps both of them mature. The voice acting is spectacular and full of personality. However, halfway into the story, it loses its shine. Sure, the dialogue is full of wit, but the heavily stereotyped characters and the straightforwardness of the plot can only go so far. It was still interesting, but the cracks were showing. Let's talk about combat. RPGs are best known for combat stats, but all the stats have been inflated to 1 trillion and beyond, as if it was making fun of stats. This is a parody game after all. In Disgaea 6, they have taken the exaggeration beyond previous entries in the series. You start the game with over 10,000 in your attack stat. You might think that 10,000 stats is enough to finish the game, but you would be wrong. Those are rookie stats, fam. Gotta pump up those numbers. Even at the beginning, the game gives away stats and levels as if it was an Oprah special. You get 30 levels. You get 30 levels. Everyone gets 30 levels. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. You get to live your power fantasy of having the highest numbers ever. However, under this flashy exterior is a detailed and immersive combat system that is polished. There are so many mechanics that I'm not going to explain all of them in a review, but each feature is intuitive and properly explained in the game. 2 of my favorite returning Disgaea features are throwing and team attacks. Characters can pick each other up and throw surprisingly long distances. Since this is a comedy game where the law of physics doesn't matter, it isn't immersion breaking and adds a lot of charm. The throwing mechanism also adds a lot of strategic options, especially for traversal and positioning. Even a weak unit can be surprisingly useful as a thrower. Team attacks randomly trigger when you perform an attack or offensive skill while other allies are nearby. Team attacks encourage you to group your units and pay attention to positioning. The progression system isn't only on steroids, it's on intergalactic rocket boosters. Disgaea removed many of the points of friction from the previous Disgaea games. For example, grinding used to be expected in a Disgaea game, but Disgaea 6 introduces the auto battle and repeat feature. You don't even need to grind anymore. You can set up the game like an idle clicker, and the characters will grind themselves. The first night, I set the auto battle. I went from level 300 to 1900 without lifting a finger. The second night, I went from level 3500 to level 8000. Now you might hate idle games, but the game doesn't force you to idle. There are dozens of ways to get stronger, and idling is just one of them. You choose what you like and use it. The game is perfectly playable and balanced without idling. The battle strategy isn't as tight as many strategic RPGs. The most important thing in a battle is how strong your characters are and paying attention to the level layout, such as geopanels and gaps. Geopanels have always been a staple of the Disgaea series, and they are sort of like a puzzle to solve that cannot be overcome with brute force. Geopanels look like small colored pyramids, and they put devastating effects on the colored floors. You can destroy them to nullify the effect or toss them somewhere else. Some effects are big, like invincibility, enemy boosting, or instant death. Geopanels are a counter to auto battle because auto battle AI do not take into consideration geopanels. Some levels also have large gaps or walls that must be solved with throwing allies or blocks. Again, this cannot be solved with auto battle. In previous Disgaea games, the item world is one of the most involved ways to strengthen your team. You can go into the world inside an item and go through 100 levels of randomized dungeon just to level that one item up. That's right, every item in the game is also a 100 level dungeon. However, in Disgaea 6, you can dispatch your allies to grind the item world for you while you do other stuff. You no longer have to play the item world yourself. Of course, if you want to manually explore the item world yourself, you can do it, but the automatic feature is always available. Now you might be thinking, that doesn't sound like the Disgaea I know and love, and I agree. This is something different, but also quite interesting. However, if you asked me what type of Disgaea I preferred, I would say the original type. Let's talk about graphics. I don't know if you noticed in the video, but the 3D rendering looks pretty low resolution. This is because I set the graphics quality to performance mode, which prioritizes responsiveness and frame rate at the expense of resolution. Before we bash the low 3D rendering resolution, I want to give the game a thumbs up for even including an option to prioritize frame rate. I really appreciate it, and I wish more console games had this feature. In my opinion, performance mode is the only way to go. Quality and balance mode both feel unresponsive to me. However, some maps make it very hard to see the placements of the characters because of a combination of low resolution and awkward camera angle. That being said, the 2D art is gorgeous. The character art is full of personality and charm. The 3D art is quite good too, and it's new to the series, but it's nothing to write home about. The animations are fun to watch, but they take too much time, so I turned them off. You have the option to set the speed of your animations so you can save time and still watch them. If you ask me, the Nintendo Switch is underpowered considering that the models are 3D now. The performance mode resolution looks so bad. It looks under 540p to me. You could play this on a PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, or PC for better resolution, but you might have to give up the portability. Finally, let's talk about the replayability. The Disgaea series has some of the strongest post-game content, and on paper, Disgaea 6 should be even better in this regard because the stats and levels can go that much higher. However, I found that the desire to continue playing was the weakest out of all the Disgaea games I've played. The loosened mechanics and reliance on auto systems made me care less about actually playing my characters. It's still massive, but for me, the magic wasn't quite the same. Overall though, Disgaea 6 is a wild ride. It nails the humor, has fun mechanics, and embraces complete absurdity in a way only the series can, but is also a little rough around the edges, both technically and mechanically. The last half of the story was particularly weak, with uninspired maps and a stagnant story. Dadozy Gaming gives Disgaea 6 Defiance of Destiny on the Nintendo Switch and 7.5 out of 10. Thanks for watching, and remember, if at first you don't succeed, just reincarnate 10,000 more times.